before a man bends, before he becomes docile, before he turns into a predictable version of himself. He's first persuaded that love will redeem him, that marriage will complete him, and that obedience will shield him. That perhaps is the greatest deception society ever sold. Not war, not religion, but the idea that men should willingly chain themselves and call it commitment. And if there was ever a man who tore the mask off this illusion, it was Diogenes of Sinope. This was no ordinary philosopher. He mocked kings, spat at vanity, and laughed at the so-called wisdom of his peers. Why? Because he saw life for what it truly was, a stage crowded with men playing roles they didn't even believe in. Husbands who paraded their wives as trophies, while secretly suffocating inside their own homes. Diogenes didn't just decline marriage, he ridiculed it. Not from hatred of women, but because he refused to surrender his soul to a dream that wasn't real. He knew what most men bury deep inside. Marriage isn't a prize, it's a leash. A leash wrapped in silk disguised as honor. And once it's slipped around your neck, every part of you becomes negotiable: your time, your peace, even your masculinity. He once discarded his cup after seeing a child drink water with bare hands. Imagine what he'd say today, watching men throw away ambition, passion, and strength just to be labeled a good husband. Diogenes didn't need a wife, a home, or wealth to feel whole. He lived in a barrel, yet carried himself like a king. No social standing, no possessions. But one thing most married men secretly crave: absolute freedom. While others whispered complaints about domestic life, he laughed. Not out of cruelty, but because he recognized the absurdity of men calling their cages happiness. To him, marriage was never about love, it was about surrender. And what is a man worth if he sacrifices his essence just to be acceptable in someone else's eyes? Even now, society repeats the same lie: that a wife will refine you, that a family will sharpen you, that love will mold you into greatness. But Diogenes would bark back like the stray dog he called his. Brother, greatness doesn't need to be domesticated. A man who must be tamed in order to be respected was never truly a man. At its core, marriage is nothing more than a state-approved contract, lifelong obligations wrapped in vows and sentiment. Men enter believing they've secured love, but what they've really signed up for is gradual servitude. Diogenes exposed illusions like these with satire. He mocked Plato's featherless biped by plucking a chicken and declaring it man. If he were alive today, he'd point at a groom in his suit and say, "Behold the well-dressed captive who thinks he is free." His philosophy was dangerous because it stripped away the poetry and showed the raw truth. Obedience breaks men. It turns lions into lapdogs, conquerors into caretakers, dreamers into ghosts with mortgages. Diogenes rejected that bargain. He preferred hunger over servitude, sunlight over shelter, raw life over decorated chains. For him, it was better to live alone in truth than to die surrounded by lies. He understood what most refused to see: that society conditions men to serve, to provide, to believe marriage is their ultimate reward. But the truth? You were whole before the vows, before the ring, before the applause. You were always enough. It's the illusion that convinces you otherwise. Diogenes lived without shame because he refused to outsource his worth. He didn't need the approval of the state, a woman, or even other philosophers. That's why he was feared, because nothing controlled him. No contract, no ritual, no expectation. He wasn't violent, he wasn't wealthy, but he was untouchably free. And that made him more dangerous than kings. Most men today live as performers, acting out strength for women who resent it, acting out love for families that misunderstand them, acting out ambition for a society that rewards obedience. At the center of this theater sits marriage, the final act, where a man smiles for the camera while unknowingly signing away his fire. Diogenes stripped away the performance. He reminded us that freedom isn't given, it's refused. And while most men willingly hand it over for approval, he spat on approval and chose himself. That's why his message still echoes. Better to live in rejection than die with applause. He showed that comfort, stability, and status are poor trades when the cost is sovereignty. He didn't call himself complete because of arrogance, but because he saw clearly freedom is the natural state. Everything else is surrender to fear, and marriage above all feeds on fear. Fear of loneliness, fear of judgment, fear of dying unloved. But Diogenes had already killed that fear. That's why he was untamed. So when a man asks, "Should I marry?" Diogenes' ghost would answer with fire, "If you need permission to be free, you are already a slave."